You may be familiar with Judas Iscariot, but did you know some consider Mary Magdalene to be known as an adulteress? Keep your bread and wine ready, and stay tuned to find out more unknown facts about the events leading up to Jesus' death. Palm Sunday is the start of the Holy Week. Beside the term Palm Sunday, Passion Sunday is used as well. Jesus left Bethphage and traveled to Jerusalem as king, where he was greeted by people. He rode on a donkey as prophecies predicted. According to Christianity, the donkey signifies Jesus' gentleness and his down-to-earth nature. The crowd started to grow as many people wanted to follow Jesus on his journey. They started to place cloaks and plants on the road ahead of him. Palm branches were also used, a tradition which is still in place today. When Jesus caught a sight of Jerusalem, he started to weep. In the evening, Jesus journeyed to Bethany and met his friends and disciples.
He is Jesus, son of Joseph from Nazareth.
Can anything good come from Nazareth?
Come and see.
According to Time, celebrating Palm Sunday goes back to at least the late 4th century AD. The earliest documentation of Holy Week celebrations were written by Egeria, a nun who wrote a travel diary of her pilgrimage. Jesus returned to Jerusalem the next day and, on his way, spotted a fig tree. Being hungry, he searched for some fruit, but in vain. He cursed the fig tree. When they reached the temple, he spotted different people in the place of worship, though none of them were there for God. According to the learned religions, Jesus was appalled by the number of money changers and merchants who were making business at the temple. On the top of that, money changers were trading local currencies to Tyrian shekels, the only coins accepted for the temple tax, making a profit along the way. But high priests as well were profiting from all this trade, which opposed their role as spiritual leaders. This angered Jesus to the point where he ran around with a small whip, overturning tables and criticizing everyone involved. He drove everyone out of the temple. But by doing this, he created a conflict and more opposition with the authorities. As explained by Kenny Burchard, a Bible teacher, the anger Jesus displayed wasn't necessarily an act of violence, but a restorative and reparative action. He didn't use his whip to hurt any people or animals, but to create movement. With attack, he mirrored back the destructive forces that were, in his opinion, destroying the equilibrium of the world. According to Burchard, by that, Jesus forces out, cleanses, and aggressively removes that which impedes personhood, worship, relationship, and mission. After spending another night in Bethany, Jesus returned to Jerusalem. On his way, he noticed the fig tree he'd previously cursed, which had dried up. Arriving back to the temple, the Jewish religious leaders were angered with Jesus and his behavior as spiritual leader of the people. They tried to arrest him, but he eluded their ambush and called them hypocrites. Jesus continued his journey and visited the Mount of Olives. According to Britannica, the peak can be found east of the Old City of Jerusalem and it's 2,694 feet high. The place is inhabited by a combined mosque and Christian chapel, while sacred Jewish burial grounds cover the mountain slopes.
You are the light of the world, and let your light so shine before men.
On the Mount of Olives, Jesus shared one of his famous prophecies, speaking about the downfall of Jerusalem. He also spoke of the epic, which will bring natural disasters, even stars falling from the sky. Just recently in 2020, a Jewish ritual bath was unearthed at the foot of Mount of Olives, dating back to around 2,000 years ago, which corresponds with the time of Jesus' life. Although many ritual baths were found across ancient Jerusalem, this was the first archaeological evidence found from that exact period. According to Father Francesco Patton, the latest excavations conducted on this site have confirmed the antiquity of the Christian memory and tradition linked to the place. And this is very important for us and for the spiritual meaning connected with the archaeological findings. Not much is written in the scriptures about this day. The day prior to the Last Supper, also known as Passover, could be spent by preparing everything necessary for the event. But many believe this is the day on which Judas Iscariot plotted his betrayal of Jesus Christ. In remembrance of this event, the day is sometimes called Spy Wednesday. According to Hope Bollinger, this event is mentioned in the Old Testament, the text written hundreds of years before as well. In that scripture, Zechariah predicts the exact amount of money for which Judas would sell Jesus out, 30 pieces of silver. I told them, so they paid me 30 pieces of silver, and the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter. This resonates with the later events in the New Testament, where Judas donated the money he got for betraying Jesus. However, the priests use it to buy a potter's field. On Thursday, Jesus organized a Passover meal for 12 of his closest disciples. As explained by Mary Fairchild for Learn Religions, the Passover feast is an important part of Jewish tradition. An 8-day celebration is prepared in memory of Israel's emancipation from Egyptian slavery and the freedom of the Jewish people. During the dinner, Jesus explained to his devotees that this would be his last meal. Jesus shared bread and wine with everyone, describing how bread stands for his body and wine for his blood. This event is the foundation for the communion ritual, the Eucharist, an important part of different church practices, which include drinking sacramental wine and eating sacramental bread, the host. After the meal, Jesus washed the feet of all of his disciples and told them they should do the same.
No slaves are greater than their master, and no messengers are greater than the one who sent them.
The chief priest and the elders had already decided they wanted to see Jesus dead, but they agreed to wait until Passover festivities were over. According to Christianity, during the Passover dinner, Jesus predicted that one of the disciples, the one that will be given the piece of bread, will betray him. He gave bread to Judas Iscariot, and at that moment, Satan entered Judas, and Judas left the dinner. He went to the chief priest, who wanted to see Jesus dead, and asked him, how much is he willing to pay? Later, while Jesus was praying in the garden, Judas entered with the guard, after he got the promised 30 pieces of silver from the chief priest in return. To show the guards which man is Jesus, Judas identified him with a kiss. As Herschel Shanks, biblical archaeology expert, summarizes in his review of the latest translation of an 8th century Gnostic gospel, the kiss had to happen because of Jesus' shape-shifting abilities. 3 out of 4 canonical gospels describe how Jesus' appearance can vary in size, color of the skin, age. He can even become bodiless. The idea of Jesus as a shapeshifter was first mentioned in Contra Celsum, written by Origen, a theologian who lived AD 185 to 254. He claimed that, to those who saw him, Jesus, he did not appear alike to all. Next morning, Judas realized what he had done and felt guilty. He returned the 30 silver coins, threw them into the temple, and hanged himself. For several hours, Jesus tried to defend himself before the Jewish high priest Caiaphas and the Jewish political tribunal of elders, Sanhedrin, but the verdict is clear: he is guilty of blasphemy. Another trial followed, before the religious Sanhedrin this time, but the verdict is the same. He is accused of blasphemy once again. But, by law, the order for execution could only come from the Roman government, so they sent Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the procreator of Judea, and accused him of the attempt to undermine the Roman government.
Do you think I'm a Jew? It was your own people and the chief priests who handed you over to me.
Pilate did not find any evidence, sent Jesus to Herod Antipas. The story repeated, and Jesus was back with Pilate. Pilate gave in and ordered the execution. Since Jesus traveled by foot from Palestine, it is reasonable to assume he was in good health before the trial started, but his health deteriorated rapidly during the 12 hours of legal proceedings. As explained further by Edwards, Gable, and Hosmer, Jesus was deeply affected by the 6 trials, suffering from great emotional stress, as evidenced by hematidrosis, blood sweat, abandonment by his closest friends, the disciples, and a physical beating after the first Jewish trial. As if the execution punishment wasn't enough, the soldiers continued to mock Jesus. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the Praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again, they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. The journey to the execution place was long and exhausting. Weakened from torture, the accused had to carry a cross from the flogging site to the site of crucifixion outside of the city. The cross Jesus had to carry was the middle part, crossbar, which weighed around 75 to 125 pounds. Accompanied by a Roman guard, naked and depleted, Jesus slowly continued his journey, supported by his loved ones from afar. There is still a debate where the exact place of the crucifixion, Golgotha, was located. But according to Joan E. Taylor, professor and writer, the site was an oval-shaped, disused quarry located west of the second wall of Jerusalem, north of the first wall. The ancient crucifixion and pre-crucifixion practices were intended to cause intense agony, and each phase could cause death on its own. Since the rules dictated that every execution should start with flogging, Jesus was severely beaten before crucifixion. This not only weakened him, but subjected him to severe blood loss and circulatory shock. The actual cause of death of Jesus could be hypovolemic shock, heart failure, cardiorespiratory failure, or something else. Luke chapter 23, verse 44 to verse 46 reads, "It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining. Jesus called out with a loud voice, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' When he had said this, he breathed his last." The exact time of Jesus' death is still debated. Some interpretations claim that the crucifixion took place earlier, so the exact time of death should be on Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. This way, Jewish law, which stated that a person is legally dead only after 3 days, would be fulfilled. This goes along with the prophecies, which saw Jesus resurrected after 3 nights and days. Nevertheless, the general view of the matter, as well as contemporary celebrations, count Good Friday as the day of Jesus' crucifixion and death. After Jesus' death, his body was put in a tomb and sealed. The guards were worried that Jesus' disciples would steal his body and tell the people he had risen from the dead. Jesus' devotees and close ones held a 40-hour-long vigil outside of the tomb, waiting for his resurrection. Most people refrained from activity that day because it was Sabbath, the day of rest. In the evening, Mary Magdalene, Mary, James's mother, and Salome went and bought some burial spices to anoint Jesus' body. According to Jesus of Nazareth, an independent historian's account of his life and teaching, they were there for the whole process of Jesus' crucifixion and death. While his male disciples fled, the women are the only members of the group who stuck by Jesus' side, even if only from afar. According to the Gospels, Mary Magdalene was Jesus' closest disciple. As per Berger A. Pearson, professor of religious studies, numerous theologians and priests intentionally downplayed the role of Mary Magdalene throughout history, turning her into a sinful woman, a sex worker. Although there is not a single place in the scripts that would mention her as such, Pope Gregory the Great identified her as the unknown adulteress mentioned in John's Gospel, and since then that story was told as the truth. The idea of Mary Magdalene as a sex worker is specific only to the Western Church interpretations. Early in the morning, Mary Magdalene visited the tomb and noticed that the stone was removed from the entrance. She called to other disciples, and together they entered the tomb. They saw the linen in which Jesus' body was wrapped, but no body. While Mary Magdalene was crying, she saw 2 angels and a figure of a man. The man turned out to be Jesus, who told her not to touch him, since he had not ascended yet. According to the Jesus Family Tomb Examined, did Jesus rise physically? Despite numerous theories and perspectives on Jesus' resurrection, the evidence demonstrated that the Bible can be trusted as a historical document, and therefore it gives credence to the resurrection accounts of Jesus of Nazareth.
Stop your doubting and believe. My Lord and my God.
The event is described in many different sources, such as in the Greek translations of the Hebrew scriptures from a Second Temple period, Jewish literature written in the period from 200 BC to 200 AD, and rabbinic literature. Lopez concludes, the fact that people would rise bodily from the dead was the predominant view and background of the period when the witnesses of Jesus' resurrection recorded the New Testament. A reading of the evidence makes this point indisputable.
Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.